Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
Today we have Sean McDonald on the program. Going to be a great day. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to go ahead and subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave a review, leave a comment. All that stuff helps. We're slowly learning how this beast works, but we'd thank you to be a part of that and start sharing the word. Sean McDonald is a producer from Pittsburgh, producer and engineer from Pittsburgh. I knew him back in the day, way back in the day. I was an assistant on a record with the band Raquel. He was in. That was maybe the biggest, coolest rock band in town, and a big producer, Toby Wright, came in to make a record, right. And I got to assist on that record. But I've been knowing him for years, but mostly through hearing about him. That's the really cool thing about folks, is you feel like you have a relationship with them, but the reality is you just have been hearing their names so much because everybody's making records with them. And Sean is that guy in Pittsburgh. He's probably, if he isn't the top guy in Pittsburgh, he probably is amongst a couple of names you would mention. If you're going to seriously make a record in Pittsburgh, he's the guy. He's got a beautiful studio there we're going to take a little tour of, and we're going to talk a little bit about his history and what he's been a part of. But also we're going to talk about, we thought it'd be cool. The two of us have built so many studios over the years just to facilitate our own work, of what we would need to build if we needed to just start a new studio. Let's say we were going somewhere and making a record at somebody's house, what we would take, and that would be the perfect little recipe for how to start any studio, the essentials for what every studio needs to be able to make hit-worthy records. Sean is a rock producer. He's done a lot of work with the Clarks and just a ton of, if you're a legendary band from Pittsburgh, you're working with Sean, and Sean has got, Pittsburgh's got a great music scene. He also is a music producer for the PBS series. It started off as the American Soundtrack, but ended up being called My Music Series, which is PBS is one of their biggest shows, and he does everything on that. He is the Swiss Army knife for that show. So welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, man. Hey, Joe. Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I also really enjoy your Facebook posts where it's like, what was it? Like
a view from the chair.
A view from the chair. I find myself getting sucked into those because you're always going through stuff. It's just you holding your phone, but it's like super compelling, and you're going through. I'm like, oh, how do you get that drum sound? And it's you just show right there. So
thank you, man.
Keep that up. It's awesome.
Thank you. Pandemic has slowed us down a little bit, but hopefully everybody gets back to normal health soon.
What's the name of your studio?
It's Red Medicine Recording.
Okay. And would you mind, I know you're on a laptop there, it's probably a little hard to poke around, but if you showed us around it, you should have just told us.
Yeah, I'll show you. It's a one big room kind of situation. Do this without pulling down the wall. And this is kind of my control room area. I have a C24 is my control surface.
That's Tascam, right?
No, it's the Avid, or it was Digi.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big glorified mouse. No audio passes through that. There are mic pre's, but don't really use them. Let's see if I can do this. A lot of cool old Neve stuff. We got the 3114s. Can we see? I'm trying to do this upside down.
They look great.
3114s, 33114s, the broadcast, telefucking V72s, Chandler stuff. Can we see that?
Yeah, great.
There we go. Bunch of old API, some 312s from Wally Hyder desk, 512s, A Designs kind of Pultec deal, Millennium Media, Summit, more Neve cards and a Mercenary Audio, 4-banger there. Dynamite compressor, Burl A to D, getting back to the rig. API 2500 typically for the drums. The Electra EQ that typically comes after that for the drums. Very Mew, a couple Chile 100s, a couple DBX 160Xs. BAE, like mini 1272 guy. Martech, that's a great guy. That MSS 10, it's kind of clean but big, if that makes sense. Purple Audio 1176s, those are great. Coil Audio, that's like an old Western electric, gnarly kind of sounding guy. Obsidian SSL clone. That Alesis AI2 is not really in use. It is a rack panel. It is worth about as much as a rack panel. So that's what that is. Fatso, you guys know what those are about. Distressor, Warm Audio 1176, another distressor. Another Motu MTAV, another rack panel filler there. The kind of weirdest thing I got going on is this Inward Connections, Steve Furlot, who has Tree Audio as well. This is kind of, there's 16 channels on the front and 4 on the back. So that's whatever that is, 40 channels total of mixer. So that's what I mix through.
Summing amp.
Yeah, so all the drums go through the top guy that has insert points on it, and all of the band and vocals go through the bottom guy, which also has inserts, and they cascade into each other. So the cool thing at Mixdown, I can grab any of these delicious dudes, EQs, compressors, and then obviously that gets fed all back through the burl. Where the hell's the burl? There's the burl.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, and then that goes back to Pro Tools digitally. So that's where my conversion happens, and I put my 2Mix back into Pro Tools via that.
Same sample rate, same session. Same.
Yeah, I don't do a separate record deck or anything like that. I've been working at 24/48 for the longest while for a lot of reasons. And that seems to work.
Hey, and I'm of the opinion that there's not a single, I can't think of a single reason to work at 44.1. Can you?
That's what all of the big brains are telling me. Since the demise of the CD, there's no real reason to stay entirely in the digital domain for a CD. No, I can't see it. And a lot of my work is the TV stuff, as you mentioned, and that's a 24/48 protocol.
All video, all the time will only be 48K for those of you who don't know.
Right on. So that's that.
I have a quick question here for you.
Yeah, man.
So that Warm Audio.
Yes.
Compare it. Those purple audios are spot on perfect. Those are like as close to a clone as I've ever used.
Yes.
So what the Warm Audio, what's your opinion?
Pretty. I had a Rev D original 1176, and before I bought the Warm, I'm like, let me check it out. I mean, because for what the Warm cost and what I end up selling the 1176 for, I could have filled 2 racks of this with the Warm Audio. The Warm Audio was pretty close. I find the purples to be a little brighter, but I kind of like that if you're going for that kind of edgy, up your nose kind of 1176 thing. I kind of like that. The Warm is maybe a little darker, maybe not as dense, but dude, are they $500 or $600 or whatever they are? It's crazy not to have one if you don't have one. And what we'll talk about today is outfitting a studio. And if everybody has a budget, and it's a great fit for the budget.
Yeah. Awesome. Go back to your guitars.
Okay. Where am I at? Here we go.
Wait a minute. I see you're running a Mac Pro back there.
Cheese grater. Yeah.
Wow, man. I didn't even know you could still keep those compliant with software and Pro Tools.
I am Pro Tools 2018.7, and don't say anything because you might make it angry, but it's working right now and everything's good. It's happening. We've got 3 of the HD16 interfaces.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're using the Avid stuff.
And I got 192 dedicated just to Q mixes. So that's so 3 are for music and 16 channels just for headphones.
Awesome.
Yeah. So guitars. I'm having a hard time doing this upside down.
No, you're doing great, actually.
That's a mini 12 string, something called a Teo. Our mutual friend Corey Congilio turned me on to that. It's a super cool little guy. High strung acoustic.
High strung being all the high strings from the 12
like a 12 string except for the low except for the high B and E. Yeah.
Right. The B and E would be in unison. All the other strings, the low E all the way up through, would be an octave higher. It's an awesome
You got it.
tool.
Got this PB Power Slide that I found at my brother's music store for $100. So you never know when you need a slide guitar. So there's that. Baritone. One thing I would like to get all crazy about is the Evertune Bridge. Are you down with that?
Yeah, Bukovac, right, was talking about that.
Our mutual friend Jeff Thurston, I turned him on to this years ago, but it's this deal here. There we go.
You're doing a great job, actually, with this laptop.
I feel like Carol Merrill here.
I'd love to see it, like the wide shot of you trying to negotiate this 90-degree laptop.
Doing yoga here. So it's basically, it keeps each string in constant tension. So if you're a bad guitar player like me and you overfret or you pull down, you can set this thing to compensate and let go of tension. Let's say that the E string is 2 pounds. And if you pull sharp, it's now 2 pounds, 1 ounce of tension. The bridge knows to let go of that 1 ounce.
Wow.
So it keeps you at E. And for bad guitar players like me and guys stacking like tracks and different scale lengths, it's a lifesaver. So I got involved with those people 10 years ago, and a guy named Cosmos Lyles, who is like one of the smartest dudes ever.
What's
and
it
I've
called?
Got them Evertune, all one word, Evertune Bridge.
Okay.
And I've got them on everything, like a baritone like this, God Saver, because it's slack tunings are tough to keep a guitar in tune. It's killer for that. But I've got it on this SG, on this Invader, which is kind of like a junior guitar mill telly from the guys down there in Nashville. I've got it on them all of these guitars because it's truly a lifesaver, man. For doing big guitar records, multi-tracking guitars.
Stand back a little bit and point it at your console. We didn't get a good look at your whole. Okay, so you got like an Argosy desk there with with the console in it, some monitors, and over the top there, I guess, is where you track over on the other side.
Yep. That's where we did a video shoot here the other night. My brother has an acoustic act called Trace Lads, and they did a charity thing here, like a charity concerts webcast kind of thing that they tracked here. Our friends the Clarks were involved, and they tracked it over at Dana's place at the church. And get this guy here, and we tracked it here. So we got a bunch of video gear in here from that shoot the other night. But it's one big room here. I've got a vocal ISO booth in the back, kind of a guitar room in the back there, lounge across the hall, which is a full-on apartment. So if we get out-of-town bands, they can stay here. Bathroom, kitchen, and I've got another room on the other side of this wall that I'm threatening to turn into another recording space, but that needs major construction. So that's, if the business comes back after the pandemic and we get a little cash, we're going to blow that wall out and do something cool over there.
And I see looks like you have absorption on the side walls and some sort of
just broadband stuff there, and some diffusion in the back. Bass traps there, up in the black stuff up in the ceiling, and I've got a ceiling cloud above me here. Pretty straightforward stuff, not a whole lot of science behind it, just trial and error. I've been here almost 20 some years, so it's just adding stuff, taking stuff away, finding what works,
And when you go out with a mix, how on is it? I mean, I know you probably had to learn the room, but are you like
pretty good?
I had a room once where it was like I knew I'd have to, like tambourines and whatnot, I'd have to like bring way lower than what I thought they should be, and because I knew they were going to do something outside the room. But you don't have any of that?
I mean, I'm always, as mixers, we're always doubting ourselves. Oh, is that snare drum too loud? That kind of stuff that we always struggle with.
But not room.
No, I know the issues. I know I've got a little issue at 160 that gets a little woolly, a little humpy at 160. But other than that, I'm pretty. I found all the bugaboos. I know where all the bodies are buried in the room, so I can work around that. Yeah.
When I was a kid,
you're monitoring, Sean.
I got the Klein and Hummel 3-ways that Neumann owns now. I forget what model they are, and the big JBL old carbon fiber ones, LSR 28Ps that were around back in the 2000s. Everybody had them. I have that in a sub with those, and my trusty clock radio over here that I have a line into so I can monitor that. And it's kind of like a laptop, what a laptop would sound like.
Lion's share of the listening when you're mixing.
The Klein and Hummels, those are the mid-range in those is super reliable. It took me a minute to get used to them. I've only been using them about a year and a half. And when I first put them on, I'm like, oh, I don't like this at all. But the mixes got better. The JBLs are fun. And typically when we track guitars, non-pandemic, I'll have the guitar player right here, and we can turn the JBL crazy loud, and the guitar players love that. The K&H's, we couldn't get that loud, but they're really great to make the judgments and mixes on. Yeah.
And are you in a commercial building? Like just
Yeah. Short story about me. When I got back from I was touring musician, drummer for 10 years, playing with anybody, horn bands, show bands, metal bands. And I got back to Pittsburgh in early 90s and started working there was a music store downstairs. It was called Swiss Vale Music. If you were a Pittsburgh guy, you're probably at least aware of it. Selling recording and selling drums. And then, the gateway drug was the 4-track. And I got into that and got, into it more and more and more. And me and a friend rented, this is the second floor of the music store. So it is a commercial building. And we pulled our resources back in the time of 8-ats and D88s. And it grew and grew and grew to a giant Soundcraft analog console and, radars and everything. And the technology morphed. But yeah, it is a commercial building. Was a music store. Now it's I've got a church, like a new non-denominational, we meet on Wednesday nights kind of thing, which is cool. It works out. He's a cool guy. And we're sharing the building. It's super cool.
If you had to put a price tag on what it cost you to acquire the full Monty, is this a 200,000? Is it 100,000? Is it?
Will my wife be watching this? I need to know. Can we block her access?
You don't have to tell us what you spent, but like to get this level of studio, what are we talking?
Well, the old vintage stuff, the Neve stuff, the Telefunken stuff, the vintage old API stuff, that just keeps going up and up and up. And as you mentioned, Toby Wright, he was kind of my Sherpa when I wanted to get into this because I was just transitioning out of the band guy thing and wanting to get into making records. And he said, okay, buy this, buy that, buy this, buy that, get some of these. So he was really helpful. And when I bought the V72s 22 years ago, they were $1,100, $1,200. Right. Now they're whatever they are, $2,800. So everything goes up. There's a lot of money here. But if I was putting a studio together now, maybe I would do it a little different. Maybe I would do everything in the box because we didn't have UA plugins and we didn't have a lot of the emulations that we have. And this is just the way I've got to working over the years. But I definitely think you could do it cheaper, a great laptop and you're there.
I'll tell you, my room, if I were to, and I did have to assess a value to it for insurance.
Right.
I would think my room is essentially an old API console rack mounted, a tape machine, bunch of compressors, a bunch of microphones, all the things you need for tracking. I would say that if I had to go buy that, and I was like going to Guitar Center today or what's a place out of Detroit, Vintage King.
Vintage King, yeah.
If I were acquiring all the stuff, barring some of the really expensive compressors like the Neve, I would say it's probably, to get a room of that ilk is probably 100 to 125 grand if you're going out raising money and trying to put it together. So the reality,
we're not even talking about cabling. I mean, patch bays or whatever. Patch bays are a good TT patch bay. Was that $600 a pop? $700, and everything is
wired. It's $2,000 a pop wired.
Yeah. This is all Canary cabling. Every box. Yeah. I mean, we did it right, and that's the kind of stuff that is not cool money to spend. If you go out and buy a $10,000 microphone, that's fun. Spending $10,000 on your cabling, not much fun,
Yeah, that's the truth. I probably have 10 to 20 grand in mic cables.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And wall panels and, like you said, Megami cabling through the wall.
How about air conditioning? How about when your air conditioning blows up?
Yeah, very good point. And I think that what you're saying was really, if we had to do it again, we might not be building the same rooms. This is the way we came up. But there is one reason why analog gear, in my opinion, really needs to stick around. And I know that there's some different solutions where you can use digital gear to track through. But like when you got a vocalist out there, you better have a really nice, maybe 3 mic options to hear them on. Because the voice is something that you can either sound great on an SM57, SM7B, a $400 mic or a $100 mic can beat out a $10,000 mic. You just don't know those things. So
100%.
You need maybe 3 or 4 really well thought out microphones, and you need to have. I would want to hit it with an analog through a nice mic pre, and then an analog compressor.
100%. Yep.
So that's going to stick around for a while. And I know with Slate and with UA, you can track through these plugins and you can model and then record. I don't do that. I don't know how many guys are doing that.
There's some dudes. I have some friends that are deep into the UA world and that unison thing where you're kind of splitting the signal, I think, and monitoring. I don't understand how it works, but dudes like it. And as you've said many times on this show, and I'm a firm believer, it's all about the song, man.
Right.
If you've got a terrible singer and a terrible song, it doesn't matter. Or if you've got a great singer and a great song, put a 57 up. That's
sometimes
really all that matters.
57. Dave Pahanish, my old writing buddy from Pittsburgh, he sounded so good on an SM57 that almost all that stuff was done on SM57s.
Oh, really?
Was that was the Nashville record done on 57?
Almost exclusively. And I had my buddy's U47 that I had borrowed, an original U47, and it was just not the microphone for him. Bill Deasy, another guy from Pittsburgh, the Gathering Field, U47 is not the microphone for Bill Deasy.
Yeah, he's got such a woolly voice. Bill's thing is chesty and woolly.
And super harsh in the mid-range on him, on his E's. So, that's the kind of thing that you'll spend the rest of your record just like regretting the microphone decision. So ideally, the goal here is like, okay, they know my room, they know your room. And Mike has a really good usable room with just a minimal amount of gear. Mike has exactly what we're talking about.
I'm looking at it right now. I'll show you my rack.
I like the penguin on the door. Who's that? I like that guy, whoever he is.
That's things my kids have made.
I love that.
Yoko Ono put that up when she came over to do her. Mike's doing all the Yoko records now.
Right, exactly. This is I don't know if you can see it, but that's my entire rig right there.
Which is all you need, by the way.
You're just doing vocal and acoustic, Mike, or what are you cutting?
I do like one channel at a time. It's just
Mikey, tell us what that is. Is that a Daking, or not a Daking, but that's like a Neve clone there, or a Chandler?
This up here is the Apogee Ensemble, which has amazing. I love the mic pre's in that thing. It sounds amazing.
Right on.
This down here, I don't know if you can see this, is a Chandler LTD1.
Yep.
And this is obviously the stressor.
Yep.
So that's in reality, that's all you need.
That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what you're tracking. If you're doing vocal and acoustic, or if you're an R&B person and it's vocal and drum machine.
I don't do bands like you and Joe do, and so
that's a trick. That's a tricky thing. Like when you start dealing about bands, you start to say, "Oh, I need to have 15 headphones. I need to have 15 headphone boxes. I need to have mics, not just my best mic and best compressor and best mic pre. I've got to have 20.
A bunch. Yep.
So,
I mean, I watched you work at the barn. And it's like sometimes you have 32 inputs going.
Yeah.
Mic pre's. That's crazy.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like doing this thing. I've always been a fan of monolithic sounds. All the records I love were done through consoles. So I have a personal philosophy that I want to have the band go through what would have been an old school console. So I got an API in essence. And it's like, for me, it's not like the overheads are a different character than the kick and snare. We used to do this thing in New York where we'd have some 1073s, we put kick and snare through the 1073s, and then the whatever else you had left would be the rest of the drum kit. But it felt very, it felt like the snare drum through the overheads was fighting with, I wasn't able to control it. So, it's all philosophy, but today, what I think is really a cool exercise is like, okay, all 3 of us have built rooms in different levels and had to make music that was then exploited nationally, like at a high level, like as good as what is out there. And I've had multiple rooms over the years, from bedrooms growing into leasing studios, into building the barn. And it's like, wouldn't it be great to know what the 30-year in the industry versions of ourselves, if we had to build a recording solution, if I were going to New Hampshire to record the Clarks, with
Right.
Sean McDonald. We're making this record together, and we had to build out a little studio. What would we get? And we'll talk about it from a full tracking date standpoint, but you can exponentially reduce this by just like buying 1/10 of it and having track building kind of studio.
I think the drum kit is the big, like, deep end of the pool line. Like that really, it's, even if you're going to do it minimally, I mean, you got a pair of overheads, bass drum, you got whatever, 6 mics to do it. Even small, look at a drum kit, 6, 8, 10 mics, something like that.
Yeah.
Just the mic stands alone and the cabling alone, and the channels that automatically changes your interface, because I guess you could do like 2, 4, 6, 8 channels at a time for a Focusrite or a UA or whatever it is. So, when I help people put studios together, I say, okay, how many tracks are we recording at one time? Is it just you and the guitar? Or are you friends with the Ohio players and they're going to come over and you got 15 people in the room? What are you going to do?
That's
what
point.
You have to figure out. Yeah.
I spent the most part of my career was spent with one rack of APIs, the 4 312s.
Mm-hmm.
The what do they call it?
3124, something like that?
Yeah. 312, 4 312s, 3124.
Yeah.
And I was able to get everything done. But the second you go into the deep end of the pool, then you do have to have redundancy and a ton of stuff. I will tell you that there's a couple of console manufacturers that are kind of blowing my mind. I have a Midas console. They're 32 input, like it's got the Pro mic pre's in it and the Pro million use faders. It's I forget what it's called. It's their big consumer, their big prosumer one.
Like live front of house thing.
Exactly. And it's incredible, the functionality and features. But when I did the math on that console, I got 32 of their Pro mic pre's. These are the mic pre's that come out of their $100,000 consoles. I got that console through just scouring around and finding it. It lists for $5,000. I think I got it for 28.
Wow.
So that's less than $100 a mic pre. Plus you have the faders, the automation, the EQ.
Yeah.
You got 4 DSP engines in it. It can become a Hue interface to Pro Tools.
Right.
You start thinking like that, and it's like, well, geez, you could roll one of those, tip one of those up in a room, or PreSonus has some incredible stuff. They've got a new 64 channel one, and the PreSonus mic pre's are really good mic pre's.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those in a little mobile rig that I have. I was mentioning setting up that system in the hotel room for those guys. I've got whatever the 8-banger is.
Yeah, Digimax or whatever.
Yeah, that's a cheap thing, but it doesn't sound bad at all.
How much of this is really, when you come down to it, we've all done that thing where we're working on a console and we're on the wrong fader, thinking we're doing something. And I've been, I hate to admit that because I'd like to think that I got good ears and that I know the difference. But I have literally been EQing the channel next on a large format console, EQing the next channel over, thinking I'm EQing the kick drum.
Bobbing like crazy, yeah.
Or a vocal, and then you go, there you go, it's good now, and then you realize you weren't even doing it. I wonder how many of us, at the end of the day, if we recorded a drum kit through PreSonus mic pre's and through APIs, how many of us would be able to do the A/B test on that? And we're talking about for 10 mic pre's, you're talking about $8,000 to $10,000 worth of mic pre's versus 10 mic pre's on the PreSonus for probably $400 or $500 off the second market. I just bought a rack of them for $100. A rack of 8. So
it's definitely a game of inches, man. I agree. Every time I get a new mic or a new mic amp, I do a kind of a shootout with everything else. I'll try to, as scientifically as I can, run it, the mic through all of the mic pre's or the pre with all of the microphones and try to get, and I keep a Pro Tools session with all of those. And it's even the high end stuff, the difference between a V72 and a Neve 3110, two drastically different designs, but in the heat of a rock mix, it's a game of inches, man. It's really.
I think a lot of it is mental too. We've been conditioned to be on a continual quest to find the piece of gear that's going to solve our problems, and I don't think it's out there. And if it is out there, I know that there's a reason why. I do love the APIs, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't hesitate to make a record on all PreSonuses.
It's about the song, man, and the player. That's the thing. I find myself getting drawn into these forums and these Facebook things, and it's always, hey, what's the best EQ for the meow meow meow, and it's these guys, and I guess maybe I did it too, but it's always about the player, especially drum sounds.
Yeah.
I get a lot of people. I kind of do some tutoring, some online help with drum things, and it's, as you guys know, it's all about the guy hitting the drum.
Yeah.
And I guess guitar to a certain extent, the whole Van Halen story or the Eric Clapton story where I picked up Van Halen's guitar and it didn't sound like Van Halen. It's about the guy hitting it,
Absolutely. But let's say
yeah.
we're that guy and we have to put together a small room that can either be like a project room to produce and make things and then do single track built overdubs. I mean, that guy could get away with one of these Focusrite, the red ones. Which ones are they? I even have one laying around.
I had one. Let me find it here. Let me find it on my.
But I've got, you could get one of those, and on the back of those, they have the ADAT optical in. So you could take that unit that has two mic pre's on it. Let's say if you got the one that's the cheapest, smallest one, you can turn that into 10 inputs with a FireWire input from an 8 from one of those PreSonus.
Come out ADAT into that. Yep.
So you could do a lot of damage in your neighborhood with that. You could have guys coming over and tracking full drum kits. This is a doable thing, and we're talking about a laptop. We're talking about probably a $100 to $200 interface that Focusrite one, or there's a myriad of them that are in that class. And then you've got this, go on Facebook Marketplace and get yourself a Digimax or Digi8, whatever they call those PreSonus ones, and plug in the light pipe cable, and you've got 10 inputs.
Yeah, you can do a drum kit now. Yeah.
And it's like, I was raised in Pittsburgh, so it was like, just let me get my hands on a microphone. Just let me get my hands on a way to have inputs to my computer or a speaker to put it through. And then it's like, you'll find, okay, I'm going to grow it. And in 10 years, you're going to have a much different system. But to get the job done, we're talking about less than $500.
Yeah, especially if
you have a laptop.
The drum thing is really the line of demarcation. If you're just going to be a onesie, twosie, vocal and acoustic, vocal and, a virtual instrument, that kind of thing. If you've got an MPC or whatever, you can, this dude's making real legit records with that. I think the drum kit is the big deal. I would always recommend getting like a good studio boom, a pro. For me, the overheads are like the most important thing. So get a good studio boom with a stereo bar and maybe a pair of matched condensers like we talked about the Warm Audio. They make KM84 knockoffs. And I've got 3 of the real ones. And I got one in just to kind of see where it was. I couldn't use the Warm and the Neumann together as a pair. But if I use them like violin, you couldn't pick them out. So get yourself a pair of the Warm 84 knockoffs, stereo bar.
What you said is incredible. That is the heart of what I want to get across, because people don't have access to gear, so it becomes a mythological thing. But when you said like, oh, violin, I couldn't tell the difference. And this is a guy that sits in a chair for 20 years doing his thing. And it's like not going to complain about that. For me, it's like, okay, maybe when I can get a KM84, I'll get that, or 269, or U47, or C12, or C414. List goes on and on of microphones that cost $7 to $10 grand. But at the end of the day, if you really are desperate to make music, don't think that those things are going to solve your problems. I used to think an SSL console would solve my problems until I got on one and I was like, oh crap. It's still
That's
me.
Not it.
It's still me,
it.
for better or for worse.
It's here, yeah.
So, these folks can grab a set of, and PreSonus has a bunch of solutions. And there's a lot of these cool little boxes that look like stage boxes, but they have the mic pre's in them. Everybody's making them. Behringer's making them. Midas is making them. You set it out in your live room. All the mic pre's live there, and you essentially have a digital remote. Then comes in, and it's a Cat5 cable comes, and then you control it via computer or a laptop and or an iPad even. So you could get 32 mic pre's at one point,
right?
And an engine to run it, and then it's just a matter of starting to grow your philosophy. So it used to be, when people would come into Audiomation in Pittsburgh when I was working there, they'd come in with a black-faced ADAT, and we'd look at it. All the engineers would get around it, like, guys from NASA, and we'd look at it and we'd wonder if this thing was going to be a problem for us, because at that point, if people wanted to make a record, have something that felt like a record, they had to come to a big recording studio like Audiomation,
Right.
or Aircraft, or Power Station, you name it.
Yeah.
You can do those level recordings if you've got the ingenuity and if you've got the ability creatively. You can make these records anywhere. And gear's not going to save your ass. It's not going to pull you out of the toilet. It's not going to be magically better through your Purple Audios or your original 1176 or the Warm.
No, and don't be paralyzed by that. I mean, I think as artists, we're all a little insecure. I think that's the nature of the beast. And we all compensate for it some way. Some people bluster, some people fear failure, and if I get that one extra microphone or I get this, don't be paralyzed by making music. I just tell people, hey man, you're gonna be terrible at this. You're gonna be, if you're just diving in, you're gonna be. I mean, I was terrible. I still question every mix I do. It's just sucking less each day. It's just getting better each day. Don't make that mistake again. And friends buy recording rigs, and I get probably 5 emails a week. Hey, I got this thing. Just because you can buy it doesn't mean if I hit the lottery and I buy an airplane, probably don't want me flying that airplane because I don't have the experience. I'm going to crash and kill everybody on board. Yeah. So same thing is true with a Pro Tools rig or miking up a drum set. Just go do it, man. Just do it.
Can I tell you guys one of my best stories? I was in Pittsburgh as a young engineer learning under Greg Vizza at Audiomation, and didn't know what I didn't know. And Greg was very much, he was like a crazy person. He would put me in the room and then go upstairs and he would draw. He was an acoustician, so he'd be drawing some concert hall or a tour bus he was designing for somebody. And I'd be stuck with the band with maybe 4 months of total pro studio knowledge. And I was in with this band from Pittsburgh called the Little Wretches. And
I know those guys.
The Little Wretches were a popular band, big underground band, and they were famous for coming in and recording 17 songs in an afternoon from 1 till 4.
Like the Ramones.
They were famous.
Well, funny thing is, Bob Wagner, that was my first band. That was like a punk rock band when I was in like junior in high school. Bob was like one of the first punk rock bands in Pittsburgh, and he went on to do the Little Wretches. And it was kind of folk punk rock. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
Joe?
I don't even know. I think I've compartmentalized it so deeply because it was such a painful experience.
You're scarred.
I'm not sure if I remember fully. I'd need to go into like therapy and to put under hypnosis to draw it all up. So I'm in this studio, and it's a big, to tell you about the studio, it was like a bunch of isolation booths, a big giant room, a big giant control room, a bunch of analog multi-track machines. And I'm in there desperately clinging to the little bit of knowledge that I have. You guys are moving so quick. You got guys in ISO booths with talkbacks, and they're not able to talk to other guys in ISO booths. Long story short, the U.S. mail delivers. His name was Bob Wagner, right?
Yep.
The U.S. Postal Service delivers a letter to the studio from Bob Wagner requesting that for any subsequent sessions that the Little Wretches have, that I'm not even on the property. Like I wasn't even allowed to be in the building. They didn't want my energy in the building. I
did not know that story.
I was just this kid, and can you imagine the fear, the utter terror that I was experiencing, being in that moment? But I look back at it now and I smile because it goes to show you that there's so many things that you try to do and take on a project that maybe you're not totally comfortable with, or that's a lot of technology you need to learn. And that's one of the few times that I failed miserably. But out of the thousands, it was really one of the only ones I could point to. As painful as it was, it's become one of my funnest and favorite.
But you probably learned something from that, right? I mean, we all try to pull things from the failures, right?
Yeah. I think I learned to be focused. And, whenever someone said, hey, can you record the Pittsburgh Symphony? And I hadn't done it before. Well, then you'd woodshed a lot longer before so you could be successful.
Yep.
But they're all good. So if we look at your room there, behind you on there, we could essentially have a laptop in front of you, a rack of two racks of PreSonus or some sort of stage box that we're talking about $1,000, $1,200 new purchase, even cheaper offline, some software, and some microphones, and we would be in the music business. You could make a record on that system. I'm asking, you could make a record on that system that the outcome people wouldn't maybe notice.
I think it depends on the
difference.
genre. I'll put an asterisk next to that. I think if I was doing a pop record, a lot of sample-based things, yeah. But I still think you're a guy that cuts drums live. I think if you're going for that aesthetic, the live real drums, not Superior Drummer or whatever that is that a lot of people are using, I think you need the physical space. I think you need that, and I get that question a lot from people. Man, I got the drums, and the guys are great drummers, but it's physics. You need certain amount of room to get a bass wave format, and that's why in my room we looked at putting a wall up here 15 years ago, but that would have cut my room volume down by a third, and I'd never get the low end that I have. When we floated this floor and did some basic construction here years ago, I learned the math for about an hour and a half that I needed to learn to find out where my big fundamentals were, 120 cycles fundamental for the bass drum and those kind of things. And we built the room volume to meet that. Now that might be the reason why I've got the weird 160 hump that I told you about. Maybe that's why, but I've learned that 160 hump. But when I'm tracking drums in this room, they really sound good. So I think that might be the gotcha. So maybe, and I do this a lot. People come here and they track drums,
right?
And I send them home. They don't need the 15 microphones and the 15 mic pre's and the $1,000 worth of mic cables. I send them home with a Pro Tools session with super cool drums in a super cool room, and then they can do their onesie twosies, guitar, bass, vocal.
And come back to mix or not.
Yeah. I do a lot of that.
Now, in your room, let's say that setup in your room, do you think you could do a record in your physical space with that cheapo setup and be able to turn out a record that people wouldn't notice? Like, oh my goodness, that new Sean McDonald record sounds so different. They would probably still be able to get it. Right?
I think it's the room and the player first. It's always the player.
Of course.
And for drums specifically, the guy hitting them is 78% of it. The room is a big part of it. Signal path is fun and familiar for me. But to answer your question, yeah, we could do it all in the box. If I had a great drummer in a great room, this is just icing on the cake. And
yeah.
And the other thing it is investment. Where we talked about now the Personas. If you buy it new out of the store, what is $500? You sell it tomorrow, it's $100 maybe.
Great point. You're not
so
going to make your money back
this is
off
kind of my
stuff.
IRA here, where the V72s and the original Neve channels and stuff, and that stuff, and the old microphones, that stuff all holds its value. Hopefully,
So, and for people who are recording in houses, a great option is usually to put the drum kit in the living room, because living rooms are usually 18 feet. If you get a normal house, unless it's a 40s like Cape Cod, but you could really get incredible drum sounds if you go to the bedrooms and put microphones in the bedrooms or in the hallway. Yeah. So you can, down, even if you're trying to totally do this thing on a guerrilla approach, you can get some really interesting room sounds. There's a guy, Mike, I don't know if you know him, really great drummer in Nashville that I used to go and get some drum tracks. He lived off of right over by Sound Emporium, and he had like an old ranch. It was a house. But he had the drums. His name was Ben something. I think he moved the studio eventually.
Ben Phillips?
Yeah, Ben Phillips. And he got these great drum sounds. He had the drums over by the fireplace and all just wood floors. So he had a couple of things in there. But then he put the mics, these Omni mics, in bedrooms. And when you brought those things up, you were like, whoa, it was you. So there's a ton of creative stuff to think of.
Ben would engineer his own sessions too.
Yeah.
So he would do full Nashville demo sessions. He would have I went to his space over by the fairgrounds over there.
Yeah, I've been in there too. That's the new space, or the newer one that I knew.
The little house.
Yeah.
That's the living room, right? That they're set up in the live room. So, and then I think the control room is a bedroom or something. I don't know.
It's when you look at it, it looks like somebody is loading gear into a venue. The control room does. It doesn't
Well,
even look
correct
like
me if I'm wrong. You're an expert here, Joe. But wasn't the Lanois record? Wasn't the Wrecking Ball thing all done in an old house? Wasn't that record done?
I think
The
they did
Emmylou Harris record.
they did that. A lot of that, I think. I thought at Woodland Digital. The one that we did, the one that was after
Well, what's
that.
the one that the movie of? There's a black and white documentary where they're in an old house and they're tracking in an old house. I thought it was. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not sure. We did a bunch of that stuff. We started in an old house over there across from Woodland Digital, an old bed and breakfast, and then subsequently moved to some other rooms. But Dan, I mean, these guys don't care. People will comment on videos if I do. Waves had me do this thing on open mix template, where I was, or an open mix form of
Right.
how I would think my way through a mix, and people were like, "How can he monitor in that barn?" And they were like, "Oh yeah," thinking I was crazy to mix in this barn. And you learn wherever you're at. It's my barn. Once you deal with the reverb, it's the flattest room known to man. The resonant standing wave in there is below 10 hertz. So
Does the record sound good? That's all you get asked.
Once I got a hold of the reverb in that room,
yeah,
it's the flattest spot I've ever mixed in. There is zero bass buildup. There's zero high-end buildup. There's zero of those funky lower mid-range frequencies because the room is so large. So it's like Dan Lanois. You'll see a picture of him. He's got that 8068 kind of like in the middle of a room, or all these guys. It's like it is always about the music. But we want to give folks we want to give them encouragement because it is the music. Don't stop creating because you can't do it in some high-profile studio. And then all it takes is this nominal. I bought my PreSonus racks. I'm about to shoot a video. I'll do a little spoiler alert for Sonar drums. I'm shooting this video where we're going to take Near Z is going to play drums in my small ISO booth, which is smaller than anyone's bedroom. And then we're going to record it with all PreSonus mic pre's. And the microphones we're using are some crappy little bundle that I bought at 3 o'clock in the morning, like $199 drum pack. Right? So we're going to add up all the money and we're going to say this is the $386 drum sound, right? And then we're going to record them all with big mics,
legit mics,
and we're going to compare them. We don't know what we're going to come up with, but we want to. The goal here is to really encourage people to say, hey, if these guys are going to put them up on violins and then not stress out about them when they're mixing and finishing the record, okay, it puts it on me. I like that. It's like, I need to make this record great.
Right.
Okay, I might eventually get a U47, but this is what I have now. And these guys are able to work with them, so I should be able to work with them. I think that's if we could leave people with that, there's a system out there that costs if you own the computer, that costs under $1,000 that you could put together and be working to scale in your marketplace.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't think you can buy a bad microphone anymore.
Yeah.
Or a bad guitar. I mean, when we were coming up, there were some pretty unplayable guitars. You could spend now $90. You can get a Yamaha acoustic guitar that plays and you can play it. And I think the same thing is with the microphone. They were like Kmart microphones, and then they were legit, pro microphones. Now, I don't think you can buy a bad piece of gear now. So don't let that be a hindrance.
A question for both you guys then. Let's say, assuming you have a computer of sorts, a workable computer, and then you give yourself a $2,000 budget. And that might even be high for some people. I'm not sure. But what would you buy in that $2,000 to, let's say, a home recording setup? And maybe it's not drums. Maybe they go to a place like yours or Joe's and they cut drums, they bring it back. What does the overdub studio look like for you? What monitors are you buying? What microphones are you buying? What interface are you for this budget?
The monitors, I think I always use the analogy, it's like eyeglasses. I mean, it's what do you see through?
Right.
What's his name? Andrew Sheps. I've been watching him. He's mixing on headphones now. Here's guys making the biggest records around, and he's mixing records on, is it Audio Technique? I forget what he's using, but he's mixing on headphones, which, was always taught as a no-no, but he's doing it, so it's working.
Yeah.
Joe, what do you think?
All right, so I'm going to say home project studio, I'm going to say $1,000. And I'm going to include, I would buy a Mac Mini. This will include the computer. And I think those somewhere $500 range, right? I can't remember what I paid for mine. But
that's assuming you got a monitor, an LCD monitor?
Yeah, I mean, you can get a monitor for $89.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are all like all Amazon purchases. I'd get myself a Mac Mini with as much RAM as I could get in it if it's an older one, or buy RAM and put it in it. I would get myself 2 racks of PreSonus, would give me 16 inputs. I'd find some cheap mic pre solution. The PreSonus stuff I just think is fantastic. So I would get 16 inputs of those and get them in via light pipe to this computer. And then I would build some software and Pro Tools. You've got to get that stuff. I would say you could get that done along with a couple of microphones, like one large diaphragm microphone, one small diaphragm microphone. Ideally, if you could, I'd get 2 of each so you could do stereo recordings on acoustics. So 4 microphones, some those mic pre's, and then you'd have to get them into the computer via either some sort of mechanism. So there would have to be some other control box involved, like that Focusrite we were talking about. That right there is something you could put in the back seat of your car too and go anywhere and make records.
Right.
And you have 16 inputs, 16 mic pre's, which you could essentially track a full drum kit, a bass player, a keyboard player, a guitar player, and a vocalist all at the same time. And if you were just doing a small little thing, I would get myself 1 rack of those. I bought the thing I'm using for this Sonar video. I bought off of Facebook Marketplace, the Digimax, I think it's called, 8 mic pre's, $100.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
$100.
Yep.
Why buy that stuff new? You can, it's fine.
Right. On.
If I was building a studio, though, I think I would look at these consoles that they have. The PreSonus consoles are great. Midas is a little bit more expensive, but Behringer has a version of that platform that they, I forget what it's called, but the X32, I think it's called.
Now, can you print EQ and effects going in, or how does that work? Like with the front end of that desk when you go to Pro Tools?
I'm not sure about those desks because I haven't used them to record. We have one in our podcast setup, and we've used them on live touring events that we do. So I'm not positive on that. I'm sure that is a doable thing, that especially on that Midas, it's so flexible. You can do anything with that console. But I'd probably try to start at the microphones and get a stereo set of small diaphragm and a stereo set of large diaphragm. And then, it's just a matter of then following mic cable, mic pre's into computer. Am I going to work in not Final Cut, or in Pro Tools? Or am I going to work in Logic? What am I going to work in? What are the minimal sets of plugins? These plugins are $29 a piece usually if you wait around long enough for any of them. You could have a system that would be uncompromised for $1,000, I would say. And it depends on what that Mac Mini costs. I can't remember now what I paid for mine. I have 2 of them. But that's just such an easy little setup there. And really, it puts you in the place to make a record that I could make at my place, or you could make at any studio.
Yeah, the computers is the decision maker there, how cool your studio is going to be. If you've got an underpowered, computer with not a whole lot of RAM, you're going to have less tracks, less plugins. It's going to be a smaller studio. But like you said, if you get something with some muscle, max out the RAM, then you can have a pretty cool virtual studio and use all the cool plugins.
I don't know. What do those Universal Audio ones cost that have the DSP built into the box? I
don't know. I should know.
Mike,
about $800.
800.
800?
For the Apollo Twin, I think it's. Don't quote me. It's $750, $800.
But you get DSP in that as well, so it's like your computer wouldn't have to work as hard. You could be working off that DSP.
And how many channels is that? How many A to D? How many mic pre's?
2, I think.
Okay.
2. Yeah, the real expense is like what you're going to use for your interface. Interface meaning I'm going from the analog world, things that move air, to things that push numbers, right? So how am I going to get this transition? The cheapest way, if you just want to get started and start messing up records and figuring your whole deal out, get one of those $250 Focusrites or something in that league.
Yeah, man.
But then it's like, okay, I have an Apogee Symphony. That's a pretty legit set of converters.
Yeah.
It's like then those are going to be serious purchases, and you'll get there. But you need to figure out what that's going to be, because the UA stuff, if I had to do it now, I'd probably be looking in the UA world. They've got tons of different 8 input ones. They've got with more cores in them. So
you guys are Pro Tools guys too. I mean, I work in Logic, and for $200, that program has everything you could possibly need to make records. If you're programming, the drums are great in it. The strings, bass, keyboards, synths. The compressors are killer. I love the compressors in it. The EQ is great. You could do it all for $199 of that with some sort of whatever interface to get in. I have a portable little Apogee Duet that I love.
Yeah, my friends that are the MIDI guys and the programming guys, they all, even if they mix in Pro Tools, they typically do all of that creation in Logic. They say it's super cool.
So inexpensive, and it just, I mean, I really like it. I spent years with Pro Tools, and it's a great program, but I don't do a ton with audio. I do a lot with MIDI. So
right.
I hear a lot of great things about Luna.
Yeah.
And Studio One, people love Studio One. I mean, there's a ton out there.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, if you're going to be doing anything with a guy like Sean or me or something where you're sending it around, you've got to eventually get into Pro Tools. It's just the vocab. It's like VHS
it's ubiquitous. Yeah.
VHS won the format wars because it came out before Betamax. It's
what a pain in the ass it is to transfer files.
Pro Tools is a complete pain, and I get more and more angry with them as I get older. I've now purchased 3 full-blown Pro Tools rigs over the years. They all last about 7 years. And you don't ever seem to buy it. You seem to be leasing it until you buy the next one, right?
Right.
But it is a necessary. It's just, if you're going to communicate in this country, in this world, this is the language we're going to use.
Yeah, at least for now. I get records in the mix that I can tell when it's a Logic thing, because everything comes in. Even if it's a mono track, it comes in as a stereo pair. Yeah. So I'm weeding things out. I don't need that, throw that away.
Yeah.
Cursing at the computer for an hour, pruning the Pro Tools session, and then you can start mixing.
You know what else these Logic guys do almost to a flaw is there's some setting, and Mike has helped me with this. There's some setting when you export the files, it will literally like blast them so that it's just like,
like normalize them.
They're it seems like leveled, not just normalized where it takes the top peak and puts it at the top. It seems like they're all just like L2 limited, just like brick wall limited.
I've seen that. I thought that was just a choice of the guy cutting. Maybe
that's an export. That's an export thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's frustrating. And it sounds horrible. It sounds like if it ever did sound good, it won't sound good again after you do that.
Right. Yeah. But you're right. The Pro Tools world is kind of the language that we're speaking, at least right now. It does make things easier. Back to the PBS stuff that I do, we're typically on such a tight turnaround. So if we get done with the show on Sunday, when I'm back in the studio Monday, I fly back to Pittsburgh, I'm sending out vocals to buddies, like elves, I call them, that work on the tuning. So I can be mixing the show with untuned vocals, and then they just send me tuned sessions, import session data. It lines up. Now, if I was dealing with a dude that was on Studio One or whatever, then I'd have to, find a WAV file and pull it in. This way, I just import session data. It lines up, and there's no problems. I keep on working. So it definitely. I think in the TV world, it makes a lot of sense.
So this is all nuanced stuff, and it's a good conversation because it's what you evolve to. You end up Sean McDonald ends up starting with one microphone, one mic pre, and some way to get it into a recordable format, and then you look over his right shoulder, and there's where he ends up. Right? This is what we all do. So the important thing, I think, for people that are wanting to create is to know, like, I just need to get going. And I don't need much to get going.
Let me give you another asterisk, though. When we started 20-whatever years ago, you couldn't do maybe 2 tracks or 4 tracks of audio on a computer. That wasn't even an option. It was Sound Tools or whatever, Deck or whatever they called it back,
Yeah, it's Sound
in
Tools.
The dark ages. So we were using, I kind of got on the D88 train. So we'd have a rack of those things,
Right.
So we didn't have the horsepower we have with computers now. So we needed all this, and we didn't have all the virtual Neves and virtual. So now, like you said, it's super cool. You buy the everything bundle from whoever, the Waves people or the UA people, and a killer laptop, and you have virtual instances of all this stuff.
That's a good point. So maybe their version of you looks like the same room, but it's just they've got tons and tons of plugins. You find the plugins you love. At the end of the day, when I have a folder full of plugins, I probably use 12 of them consistently.
Sad, isn't it?
Well,
It's like collecting baseball cards or something, you know.
I guess it's sad. I actually go in and I take them out so my Pro Tools will load quicker of things I don't ever use.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like, it's kind of refreshing to me. All the greatest guys that I get to visit with that are big mix engineers, it's unbelievable how simplified their processes are, how much they're using the same static settings and just pushing level into a piece of gear, or the same, essentially the music is what makes it different. Your process remains very much the same. And people will find that. They'll find the plugins that they like, and they'll find them at good deals. You know, I just really want to encourage people to get busy experimenting with it. And you don't need an Apogee Symphony to do that.
Ron Petrov says Joe can mix an entire record with a Wave C4.
And he probably has.
Well, I have done records. What's that, bud?
You're the master of the C4. You can make that thing dance.
Well, you know, I think that people are amazed sometimes when they see how little plugins someone has on something. I used to have, when I worked in New York, I was working out of this little rehearsal studio that had a Trident room at the end. And it was a brilliant idea. Clay Sheff put these rehearsal rooms in, and then he put this little New Yorkie beat up studio. Felt very much like, you know, going down to, what's that place down the Bowery? CBGB's. It felt like that vibe. But everybody that came in to rehearse ended up in that studio. It was the most genius move ever. No advertising needing. But that room, and then we had an SSL room that we built upstairs. And I was working primarily out of the SSL room, but we had gear that would float between the two rooms. And I would go down, and there was this one engineer, sweet human, great dude. He had this beautiful dog he'd bring in, this little Labradoodle. In New York City, he'd have this little mutt with him. And he was a sweet guy. But music was not for him. He was not a good engineer at all. But he did like gear. So if I ever would want to go get something from that room and take it up to the SSL room, it would never be in the closet when he was working. I would go into the control room, and all the gear would be in there, and everything had lights on it. And if you were just a cameraman, it would be like the most amazing visual you'd ever see. But it sounded horrible.
Oh, man.
How many times have you looked at a plug-in queue and then said, screw it, I'm going to bypass all of them. And then you're like, oh, it's better. Like, backing out of bad decisions is half of what we need to learn. And it's good as a new person to go ahead and try to put this stereolized version of it in and use a flanger on it and put a delay on it and a reverb and feed the reverb to the delay and then compress and parallel compress and malt out to this and EQ it this way. But at the end of the day, you should be able to back out of decisions, have a bunch of great experiences. You don't need $1 million in gear to do it.
Save copy as is the best thing about creating music, because let's try the wacky Beach Boys reverb, save copy as. Let's try the Rick Rubin Drive version, save copy as, and you can bring those up. That's a great thing about working in the virtual world, is you can try different things on, not to prolong decisions. That's the biggest thing I try to coach people about, is at the end of your session, whether it was a tracking session and you're just starting, or it was, you're in the final throes of mixing the records, always print a mix. Go home with a mix. Yeah. Because at least I know my psychosis, it's not good. And you fret over this. But every time I print a mix and I listen to it the next day on the phone, that wasn't as terrible as I thought it was.
You're right.
So in the last 5 or 6 years, I've gotten the habit of, whether it's just tracking basics or in the final mixes, I always print a mix, put it up on Dropbox, and have it on my phone in the morning. And then you feel like you're making momentum. You can listen to that with objectivity, which is probably our most important tool in the whole studio, is objectivity. That's why we go to mastering engineers, is, they probably have a better room and different gear, but it's a fresh set of ears. It's somebody that you respect and that has objectivity that you don't have about your records. So by printing that mix when you leave the studio at 10 o'clock and you listen to it when you wake up in the morning, you have that time of objectivity. And then you come in the next day and you kind of pick up that momentum. You're not still fretting on, is it 3K or 2K on the bass drum? All that crazy minutia that we've all been, in over our heads about.
We just interviewed Vance Powell, and I think he said that, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but some of the final mixes off of Traveler were rough mixes from Night of.
There you go.
He did, what did he say? He did like 7 of them in like
5 hours or something, 3 hours.
something like that.
And sometimes there's something behind it. If you're kind of high off of the energy of the tracking thing, that, not to get too hippie on you, but that permeates into you as the guy mixing it. That, oh man, that was, I just witnessed that. It's like wildlife photography. I just saw that. That's amazing. Let me get in here and do this. So I believe that if he was able to witness something that cool, then he was able to mix it and was inspired by that. That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, not to mention, great conversation, by the way, not to mention that you've been able to take a market that's not known for music and turn it into a profitable business. So you're an example of what everyone with a little hard work can be if they pursue it wherever. They don't have to move to LA. They don't have to move to Nashville or New York.
Yeah, it's finding your niche, and we're in a service industry. Our job is to get the ideas in a musician's head to come out of the speakers. That's my job.
Yeah.
If it's sad, let's make it really sad. If it's angry, let's make it really angry. If it's happy, let's make it. My job is to take their story and turn it into a movie. If you want to use the film,
that's great.
Analogy. That's what I'm here to do, and I've tried to do that, and hopefully we've had some, made some people happy by doing that.
Well, I've heard a lot of your records. They're fantastic.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
And anybody, I don't know what you're doing, how open you are to it, but anybody who would need mentoring, I think that finding a mentorship in audio made the difference for me. I try to be that to other people. You seem like you would do that. I mean, we'll put up your contact information, and people want to make records with you, or if they want to start records with you, take it back to their crib. You'd be the kind of guy that if they rung the phone at 9:00 at night and they had a question about how to track a vocal on the record you had done, you'd help them out. So
100%. Yeah, I've got probably a core 10 or 12 clients I've had now for about 10 years, and most of them are hobbyists. Like this guy's a plumber and he plays guitar at night. This guy's a lawyer. Those kind of cats. And I do a lot of Pro Tools, pit crew kind of help. Like, I got 9073 error. What is that? And we do like one of these Zoom deals or a screen share, and we help them. But there's also musical things, like how do we get this vocal to set? And sometimes they're local people and sometimes they're not. But yeah, I'd be happy to get involved with people like that. 100%.
How can people find you?
Facebook, Sean McDonald, Red Medicine Recording on Facebook. Instagram, I'm Sean McDonald, all one word. Twitter, it's I'm Sean McDonald, all one word.
Do you have a dedicated website for you?
SeanMcDonald.com. It's a horrible old rinky-dink website that needs to be redone. So if anybody out there is web people, I'd love to talk to you. But there's credits and some audio there, and a contact link at SeanMcDonald.com.
We'll organize all that and put it down in the description.
Right on.
I want to thank you, dude, for coming on.
Oh man,
so generous.
It means the world to me
information.
that you have me on, and Mike, I really appreciate it. It's a killer podcast. You guys are putting a good thing out there. I'm really proud to be part of it. Thanks so much, man.
Well, thank you. That's it. We'll see you next time. Signing off from the West Barn.